The first person to ever lay eyes on a tardigrade was a Dutch cloth merchant with a private obsession. Antony van Leeuwenhoek, in the year 1773, had been grinding his own glass lenses for decades. His letter to the Royal Society of London described the pond water he collected near his home in Delft, Netherlands. Inside it, he reported seeing animalcules so small that 1,000 could fit on a grain of sand. He had no name for what he saw. He drew their slow, lumbering gait, a bear-like shuffle, visible only when the lens bent light just right. He called them water bears. He could never have known he was looking at something that had outlived every empire, every ice age, every mass extinction the planet could throw. But here's what the textbooks ignore. When Van Leeuwenhoek sealed those ponds in his microscope, the animalcules he found were morphologically identical to the tardigrades we collect from moss in city parks today. The same shape, the same size range, never exceeding 1.5 millimeters across 600 million years. That constancy is the contradiction. If you've ever watched a nature documentary and felt the explanation was too clean, you know the frustration. The neat story of evolution says species either adapt or die. The fossil record is supposed to show a steady march of complexity, but the tardigrade punches a hole straight through that assumption. That hole runs deeper than most people realize. If you want to keep uncovering the truths the textbook editors left out, the inconsistencies that force a rewrite of biology's core narrative, then subscribe to this channel. We don't stop at the surface contradiction. We follow it until the model cracks. And in the comments, let me know, what was the first belief about evolution that this creature's constancy just shattered for you? Christian Gottfried Ehrenberg formally named the genus Tardigrada in 1833 after pulling specimens from Baltic Sea samples. He gave them the name that means slow walker. Slow walkers that had been walking since before the first trilobite dropped its shell. The earliest unequivocal tardigrade fossil, Milnesium swolenskai, was found trapped in Canadian amber from the late Cretaceous, 99 million years old. That amber hardened around an animal whose descendants still crawl through damp places on every continent. The same body plan, the same plump, segmented legs, the same blunt head with a circular mouth. When you hold a living tardigrade in one hand and look at the fossil in the other, you're holding a challenge to the idea that evolution requires visible change. Now consider this. Bayesian relaxed clock analyses place the split of the entire tardigrada lineage from other ecdysozoans at approximately 600 million years ago. The Cambrian explosion was just beginning. The first complex eyes hadn't evolved. The continent we now call Earth did not yet have soil in the way you understand it. The tardigrade lineage began before the first tree, before the first fish, before the first bone. And it did not change. That is not a hypothesis. That is a measured number. Between that origin point and the present, the planet has experienced 5 major mass extinctions that reshaped the tree of life completely. Fossil and molecular evidence confirm tardigrades survived every single one. The end Ordovician event at approximately 443 million years ago eliminated 85% of marine species. Tardigrades persisted. The late Devonian extinction at 372 million years ago collapsed the reef ecosystems. Tardigrades persisted. The Permian-Triassic extinction at 252 million years ago was the closest this planet ever came to sterilizing itself. 96% of marine species lost. Tardigrades persisted. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction at 201 million years ago, and then the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction at 66 million years ago. The Chicxulub impact a 6-mile-wide asteroid hitting the Yucatan Peninsula at 60,000 miles per hour. The impact winter that followed eliminated approximately 75% of terrestrial species. Every non-avian dinosaur was gone. What survived that global darkness? The ancestors of modern birds, small mammals, a few reptiles, and a creature small enough to shelter inside a frozen drop of dew. The tardigrade was there. And here's what the textbooks leave out. The dinosaur extinction was not a selective event. It was a statistical purge. Species with large body size and specialized diets were disproportionately hit. But tardigrades have a different survival currency, one that involves no structural adaptation at all. The mechanism is called cryptobiosis, from the Greek kryptos, meaning hidden, and bios, meaning life. A tardigrade does not fight the hostile environment. It suspends itself entirely. When the moss dries out, the tardigrade curls its legs inward, expels nearly all the water from its cells, and shrivels into a barrel-shaped husk called a tun. Metabolism drops to less than 0.01% of normal. No heartbeat, no respiration, no neuronal activity measurable by our instruments. It enters a state that sits on the boundary between life and physical chemistry. It becomes a glass-like structure, held together by the same sugars that protect freeze-dried seeds. In that state, it can wait. And it does not wait in hiding. It waits exposed, on the surface of dry bark, in the crevice of a sun-baked rock, on the frozen lip of an Antarctic dry valley. A specimen of Echeniscus antarcticus was collected at 78 degrees south latitude, where the soil is so cold and dry that the moss does not grow. The median time for a tardigrade to resume full locomotion after 30 days of anhydrobiosis at 20% relative humidity is 3 hours. The interquartile range is 2 to 4 hours. That was measured in a 2021 PNAS study with a sample size of 120 individuals, but 3 hours is the recovery time. The survival time in that desiccated state is measured in decades, possibly centuries, possibly longer than the entire lifespan of a typical vertebrate species. Modern surveys have now recorded tardigrades on every continent. Of the 1,312 described species listed in the World Register of Marine Species as of December 2023, 71% are limnoterrestrial, living in soil, moss, and freshwater. 29% are marine. They colonized tidal zones, deep-sea sediments, hydrothermal vents. The same basic form persisted through environments that should, by evolutionary logic, have forced divergence. But here's the contradiction that digs deepest. The tardigrade never evolved complex organs. It has no circulatory system, no heart, no blood vessels. It relies entirely on cuticular diffusion, with oxygen passing directly through its body wall. It has no respiratory system, no dedicated excretory system. Its nervous system is a simple ladder-like cord, distant from the centralized brains of arthropods or vertebrates, and yet it performs a feat of environmental tolerance that no complex organ system can match. The absence of a heart is not a limitation. It is an advantage. A specialized organ is a failure point. A heart stops, you die. A tardigrade simply dries out every cell simultaneously. No organ fails because no organ exists to fail. You are now seeing the pattern that the establishment doesn't want you to dwell on. The deeper you go, the more the standard model of adaptation starts to look like a story told after the fact. If you want to join the small group of people who are willing to follow these contradictions all the way down, subscribe to this channel. We are the ones who read the raw studies, not the press releases. And in the comments, drop one word: simplicity, because that is the strategy that outlasted every heart that ever beat. Ecologically, tardigrades occupy hydric niches: freshwater, marine, mosses, lichens, soil. They are everywhere water temporarily gathers and then leaves. Their entire evolutionary strategy is built around the assumption that the environment will periodically try to kill them. That strategy did not emerge from a recent adaptation. The first tardigrade genome was sequenced in 2015, Hypsibius dujardini, with a compact genome of approximately 100 megabases. What the sequence revealed contradicts the simplest story. The genome is highly conserved. It contains very few unique gene families compared to other ecdysozoans, but it overexpresses a specific group of proteins called tardigrade-specific intrinsically disordered proteins, TDPs, that literally replace water in the cell and form a protective glass matrix. These stress protein families are late origin, not ancient. They appear to have evolved rapidly early in the tardigrade lineage and then remained unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. The creature did not acquire complexity. It acquired a single biological trick and perfected it once. If you've ever watched a new species emerge in the fossil record and wondered why some lineages change so little, you already feel the shape of the problem. The tardigrade is the most extreme case of morphological stasis in the animal kingdom. When researchers exposed Rhamazothius variornatus to the vacuum of space, a pressure of 10 to the negative 6th pascals for 48 hours, 82% of individuals survived and fully recovered after rehydration. The 2020 PLOS ONE study had a sample size of 200 specimens. That is not a statistical fluke. When Milnesium tardigratum was subjected to a 150 gray dose of gamma radiation in a 2022 study, 68% survived. DNA double-strand breaks were reduced by 45% relative to the benchmark organism Caenorhabditis elegans. The mechanism is not armor. There is no thick cuticle, no shell, no toxin. The tardigrade survives because its cells can tolerate the destruction of their own contents, halt every process of life, and restart from a dry, radiation-shattered copy. Around the midpoint of this story, you might begin to feel the central paradox pressing against everything you were taught about evolution. Natural selection is supposed to reward advantageous variation, but what happens when the optimal strategy is to stop varying? The tardigrade's body length has never exceeded 1.5 millimeters across its entire 600 million year record. The same range that Van Leeuwenhoek recorded from his Delft pond is the same range preserved in Cretaceous amber. No new skeletal structures, no macro-morphological change. This is not a creature that failed to evolve. It is a creature that evolved into a solution so efficient that further change became a disadvantage. When the Chicxulub asteroid struck 66 million years ago, the impact winter collapsed food chains from the base up. Photosynthesis shut down for months to years. Large-bodied herbivores starved. Their predators starved with them. But a tardigrade in a dry patch of moss, curled into a ton on a fallen log, did not need food. It did not need oxygen. It did not need warmth. It had already entered a state that bypassed the very definition of starvation. The KPG boundary eliminated approximately 75% of terrestrial species. It wiped out every animal with a body mass over roughly 25 kilograms. The tardigrade walked through that extinction event without taking a single evolutionary step. And this is where it gets dangerous for the official model, because the tardigrade is not alone. The same pattern, extreme resilience without visible morphological adaptation, appears in other microscopic lineages. Bedelloid rotifers, nematodes. The pattern suggests that miniaturization itself might be a strategy. When a body is small enough, It no longer needs the complex support systems that make larger bodies vulnerable. The trade-off between complexity and resilience shifts. The tardigrade represents the endpoint of that trade. No more complexity than necessary. No less resilience than possible. The genome of Hypsibius dugiardini, sequenced in 2015, confirmed this compact strategy. The gene set is highly conserved, but includes families of stress proteins that appear nowhere else in the animal kingdom. These are not adaptations in the Darwinian sense of gradual refinement. They are molecular tools that emerged early and stayed. By the time the first dinosaur egg was laid, the tardigrade had already perfected its survival mechanism. By the time the last dinosaur fell, the tardigrade had not improved it. It did not need to. The tardigrade did not outcompete the dinosaur. It did not evolve a faster claw or a thicker hide. It simply waited in a state that sits between chemistry and life, while the rest of the animal kingdom went extinct around it. The title of this video asks a dangerous question. How did a microscopic tardigrade outlive every dinosaur without a single adaptation? The answer is more unsettling than the question. The tardigrade did adapt, exactly once, and then it stopped. What we call stasis is actually a peak, a local optimum of survival that requires no further modification. The tardigrade solved the problem of mass extinction by making itself so simple that nothing can break it. 1,312 described species. Every continent, every ocean, every mass extinction of the last 600 million years. And they still look exactly as they did in Van Leeuwenhoek's pond, exactly as they did in the Cretaceous amber, exactly as they might appear in a puddle on a planet that no longer has us. The file label on the earliest tardigrade fossil once read, "Unclassified anatomical anomaly in amber." It sat in a museum drawer for decades before someone realized what it was. The label was correct in ways the curators never intended. Anomaly, an exception to the rule that evolution must move forward. When you discover that a creature has outlived every extinction without changing, you have discovered that the rule itself may be incomplete. Evolution does not always reward the novel. Sometimes it rewards the one who never needed to become something else. Consider the blue-green algae that paved the way for the oxygen atmosphere we breathe today. Those photosynthetic microbes, which appeared roughly 2.7 billion years ago, were the first planetary engineers. They produced oxygen as a waste product, and that waste nearly sterilized the planet. The Great Oxidation Event, around 2.4 billion years ago, was a mass extinction caused by a biological waste product. Anaerobic organisms that had dominated for billions of years were poisoned by the very air that later animals would breathe. The planet's entire chemistry flipped. The tardigrade lineage had not yet split from other ecdysozoans at that time, but the principle was already in operation. The most successful biological strategies are not the most complex. They are the ones that exploit a fundamental chemical or physical property that cannot be outcompeted. Microbes exploited photosynthesis. Tardigrades exploited the physics of water and glass. Both strategies are billions of years old. Both are still in use. Neither has been replaced by a superior innovation. When you look at a tardigrade under a microscope, you're not looking at a primitive relic that failed to evolve. You're looking at the endpoint of a design process that reached its optimum in the Precambrian and then stopped. The creature did not stagnate. It perfected. The scorch of a 300°C hydrothermal vent, the vacuum of space, the frozen emptiness of the Antarctic dry valleys, the radiation of a nuclear waste site. The tardigrade does not survive these extremes by becoming stronger. It survives by becoming less alive. It drops below the threshold where damage can accumulate. It pauses the arrow of time inside its own cells, and when the environment returns to a state that can support the messy chemical process we call life, it resumes. There is a cold elegance in that strategy. It does not rely on speed, strength, intelligence, or social cooperation. It relies on the ability to stop being an organism until it is safe to start again. Every other lineage that survived the great extinctions did so by changing form. Mammals shrank and grew fur. Birds hollowed their bones and took to the air. Reptiles sheltered underground and evolved scales. The tardigrade did none of these things. It simply found a way to become undead. Suspended. A molecular photograph of itself, waiting for the right solvent to develop the image again. That image, the tardigrade as suspended photograph, is the closest we can come to understanding its strategy. If this revelation has shifted something in your own understanding of what life can do, then don't let the trail end here. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next time we pull a thread that unravels another comfortable assumption. And in the comments, leave one word: undead, because that is the state that rewrites the rules of survival. That is the answer to the question this video began with. The tardigrade outlived every dinosaur without a single adaptation because it solved a more fundamental problem than dinosaurs ever faced. Dinosaurs solved the problem of dominating an ecosystem. The tardigrade solved the problem of being eliminated. And the problem of being eliminated is the only problem that matters at the scale of geological time. The world does not remember the strongest species. It remembers the one that learned to wait. When you hold a tardigrade in your palm, you feel nothing. No resistance, no warmth. The creature is too small to register through human nerves. But what you are holding is older than every mountain range on this continent, older than every species of tree that ever cast a shadow, older than the concept of bone itself. The moss where it lives will dry and crack under your footprint. The tardigrade will curl into its tun and wait. It will wait through your entire life, through the lives of your grandchildren, through the collapse of the civilization that built the microscope used to find it. And when the environment returns, when the rain falls again on the cracked soil, it will uncurl, extend its stubby legs, and resume its slow walk across a grain of sand. The water bear does not know it has outlived the dinosaurs. It does not know it has outlasted every mass extinction. It does not know it is the quietest contradiction in the history of evolutionary biology. It simply continues, a slow walker that never needed to hurry because it had already found the one strategy that makes hurry unnecessary. That is the lesson the tardigrade leaves pressed into the fossil record, written in the amber of 99 million years ago, still walking in the damp moss of your own neighborhood. The most resilient thing on this planet is not the sharpest or the fastest. It is the one that learned how to stop being alive until the danger passed.